And when it comes to the inflation, or I like to call corporate price gouging, and now you have a lot of people who are now being forced to brown bag it instead. So that's why it says, but that's not the massive windfall that restaurants, salad bar, and sandwich spots had hoped for after the pandemic decimated their midday business. Because many workers are finding picking up lunch is too pricey and are more schlepping in Tupperware and brown bags than they did a year ago. Basically meaning that because they have to spend that money on gas, on childcare, on wear and tear of their car, all these different things. Also, you got to remember, like, here's an indirect thing that people don't think about, right? If you have to go into the office, that means you got to wear the right attire to go into the office, meaning you're doing more laundry, which means you have to buy more detergent. You got to buy more the dryer sheets, the fabric softener. If you use any of that, you're using more water, you're using more electricity, which means that that's also another variable that takes away from that money that you would normally use to go out to eat. Now it's being used to wash your clothes so you can go in the office. So you can't just do your work in your pajamas anymore. Now you actually have to wear, the clothes in order to go back into the office. So it's forcing you to spend more money. So as far as I know, there has been a way that people have said, you save a lot more money if you just brought your lunch to work, which a lot of people, they still do, especially those of us who are lower on the rungs of the economic ladder. But there seems to be a trend of brown bagging it, as we like to call it, going up. And it's quite interesting to see how this is becoming more and more prevalent. What does this mean? What does this point to? So there's this article, and shout out to Roger Meadows for this story, because he shared this with me. And so I would like to share this with you. So there's an article here that I want to get into. And it says, more people are bringing lunch to work. That's a bad economic indicator. First of all, it is a bad economic indicator. And we're going to look as to why. And it's because there's a recession afoot. Professor Richard Wolff said that in these United States, under the capitalist economic model that we have, is that a recession typically happens every 4 to 7 years. Well, the last recession that we had was in 2020 during the pandemic. It is now 2025, so we're well within the 4 to 7 year marker. We are right on time. And so now it is being reflected in the personal lives of many Americans in this country, where people are bringing their lunch to work. So let's get into this and let's discuss. So look at that. Look, when I was working in the office, or look, when I was working in sales, baby, they look a lot like this. Oh, there's somebody named James in there. Okay, I wonder what he got to eat. He probably got some spaghetti, you know what I'm saying? Because that's how I'll roll. Anyways, it says inside the office fridge, maybe behind a don't touch post-it note, is a telling economic indicator. More employees are eating lunches brought from home than they have in years. Millions of people have been called back to work in offices, but that's not the massive windfall that restaurants, salad bars, and sandwich spots had hoped for after the COVID-19 pandemic decimated their midday businesses. Many workers are finding picking up lunch is too pricey, and more are schlepping in Tupperware in brown bags than they did a year ago. So one of the things is, says millions of people have been called back to work in the offices. So let me stop there for a second, because one of the things that actually was interesting, and Roger actually was like, hey, this reminds me of this one part that you actually talked about in one of your earlier streams. And so let me see if I can get it up here. But we talked about people being forced back into the office, right? That was one of the things that we actually had a discussion. And so let me see if I can get this up here. Yes. Okay. So let me see. That's it right there. Let's go there. All right. So I'm going to play this right quick, and then we'll continue in the article. But as far as making it so that people will return to the office, people were like, well, why are people returning to the office? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's actually more economically viable for people to stay at home and work from home rather than come back to the office. Maybe it's economically viable for workers, but of course, in this capitalist system, if it's good for workers, that means it's not good for the people at the top. So let me share this. And yes, you're going to see me twice on screen, but that's okay. You can use a double dose of JB. But let's get into this. Well, let me show you. Now, this tweet is no longer on Twitter, but I got the screenshot, and I just want to share this. So, at the height, I remember this tweet got over 250,000 likes because it's true. Let's enlarge. It says, casual reminder that a huge reason that they don't want you to work from home anymore is because in terms of capitalism, it makes dozens of skyscrapers and office buildings they built obsolete, impractical, unprofitable, and generally a bad financial investment. Like, seriously, imagine what a city like New York City or LA, Los Angeles, places that are practically designed around a vast quantity of these sort of buildings would look like if everyone who could work from home did. I want you to think about that. Because that's why they want you back in the office. There's a little bit more detail about that. So let me share this video. And so let me get into this. Let me see. I want to make sure. And so, so let's get into this. Let me fast forward a little bit to the primary reason. Hang on, let me make sure. All right.
Now, let's get to the real reason. Let me tell y'all, okay, you've waited however many minutes this video is going. Let me tell you the real reason. It's the tax deductions, baby. Y'all know Noelle Randall is a real estate entrepreneur. I absolutely love real estate. Things that have to do with real estate excite me. But one of the reasons why real estate is exciting for so many people is because of the tax deductions. Well, many of these companies have received numerous and big tax deductions for the real estate that they have and having those employees come into those offices. Okay. There's the leases on commercial properties. Think about that. They have those leases and they want to continue to get those leases. That is important for not only the company, but the company, those commercial companies that own that real estate, the property management companies that run that commercial real estate. That's revenue for them. So you get local, county, state, and even federal tax deductions for having a company with employees that are in the office and how many people go to the office. That is super important. And I'm going to actually share with you a real example that I saw with my own two eyes. I was working for a company called Movement Mortgage, and this was, I think, like one of the last jobs that I had where I was gaining my confidence. Like, I'm going to get out of the workforce, but I really wasn't ready. I was still kind of a chicken. And that was really because, just my mindset. I just really wasn't all the way there, since 2015, 2016. So, but Movement Mortgage was actually based out of Norfolk, Virginia. And so when I first went to work there, we were working in this kind of old office that, was in Norfolk. But guess what? They actually, I'm not even going to get into all of it. It may have even been for Virginia Beach, but the city of Norfolk actually gave Movement Mortgage. And again, this is public records. I don't feel like I'm sharing anything, crazy. The city of Norfolk gave them a ton of money to take a rundown JCPenney in the mall, in the Norfolk Mall. And again, you can look this up, for Movement Mortgage to bring all of their operations there from the Virginia Beach office. And it was an amazing office. It was beautiful. They completely renovated an old JCPenney that had went out of business. And we literally worked at the mall. Okay, the mall was like half empty. This is Norfolk, Virginia. And this was, again, Norfolk, Virginia's economic development department. Okay, so there's tons of economic development departments within counties and cities and local governments that are working to bring employers to their area. And they give them really great subsidies. They give them tax benefits. They even sometimes give them outright money, to renovate and things like that. So I'm not.
So, with that being said, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that now that they're forcing workers back to work, the money that would go towards going to the local deli, going to local restaurants, things like that, or shopping at your local grocery store, that money's not going to gas. That's good money going to wear and tear on your car, trying to get into the office. That's money going towards maybe paying more for childcare. So the money that's actually could be used at these restaurants or food stops right near the job aren't being used there because it's being taken up by having to travel back into the office, by having to essentially spend that money elsewhere because people just aren't making enough. And when it comes to the inflation, or I like to call corporate price gouging, and now you have a lot of people who are now being forced to brown bag it instead. So that's why it says, but that's not the massive windfall that restaurants, salad bar, and sandwich spots had hoped for after the pandemic decimated their midday business. Because many workers are finding picking up lunch is too pricey and are more schlepping in Tupperware and brown bags than they did a year ago. Basically meaning that because they have to spend that money on gas, on childcare, on wear and tear of their car, all these different things. Also, you got to remember, here's an indirect thing that people don't think about, right? If you have to go into the office, that means you got to wear the right attire to go into the office, meaning you're doing more laundry, which means you have to buy more detergent. You got to buy more the dryer sheets, the fabric softener. If you use any of that, you're using more water, you're using more electricity, which means that's also another variable that takes away from that money that you would normally use to go out to eat. Now is being used to wash your clothes so you can go in the office. So you can't just do your work in your pajamas anymore. Now you actually have to wear, the clothes in order to go back into the office. So it's forcing you to spend more money. This is why it's great for the people who own the buildings. It's great for, the owners of these corporations, but it's bad for workers because wages have not kept up with inflation. And so therefore, people are now reducing their costs by not spending the money on the businesses that surround the office anymore. Let's continue. It says nationwide, the number of lunches bought from restaurants and other establishments fell 3% in 2024 from the year before to 19.5 billion. Fewer than were purchased even in 2020, the height of the pandemic work from home era, according to the consumer analytics from Circana. Meanwhile, purchases of food from grocery and other stores that shoppers intend to eat at home or bring to work for lunch climbed 1%. So those grocery stores that are in the urban and suburban areas where there's not too many offices nearby, those stores are actually getting more of the money because the grocery stores are actually benefiting now. But at the same time, it's actually cheaper to make your own food at home than it is to go into the office. And so those local places are now starting to get more profit. But at the same time, if you own a food store, a salad bar, or a sandwich shop, or what have you, or a burger joint that's right near the offices, well, you're hurting more. And that's because the offices that you service as these small businesses that may be surrounding them, well, these bosses are not paying the workers that would normally buy your food a living wage, or they're not paying them enough in order to be able to buy lunch from you. So therefore, because of their greed, now your business suffers. And see how it's a domino effect? Add on top of that, Donald Trump's tariffs. Well, looks like on top of it, now they aren't going to be spending much more on, to pay their workers because they got to push that cost on the workers when it comes to the food prices and things like that. But also, you as a business owner, you now have to pay tariffs on things that are imported out of countries that actually may have a tariff slap on it now. So you're actually making even more money, which honestly, to be honest with you, this is actually going to further kill small businesses. It's a domino effect. Bethany Kennedy, an attorney near Buffalo, New York, says she used to spend $500 a month going out to lunch during the week. Rising costs, including a jump in her property taxes, made her reconsider. Now she limits herself to one lunch out a week when she's really craving it. She brings in pre-made meals such as Southwest salads with corn, beans, cheese, and tortilla strips, or Stouffer's 3-cheese rigatoni from her local Aldi the rest of the week. She revels in saving money, but there's a downside. She says, I'm starting to get bored. The shift is a threat to the ecosystem of delis, cafes, and other office area eateries that are already went through near extinction of the 2020 pandemic lockdowns, when thousands closed for good and others struggled serving takeout for months. It says in downtown Boston, most full-service restaurants haven't resumed lunch service post-COVID. That was from Michael J. Nichols, president of the Downtown Boston Alliance. Now, who else is going to suffer? Coffee shops. Because people aren't going to start spending $3, $4, $5 for a coffee when they can start making their coffee at home, put it in a mug, and bring it with them to work. So all these coffee shops, they're going to take a hit too. Watch. And plus, a lot of these offices, they got their own coffee makers in them. People are going to start bringing their coffee from home and making their coffee fresh at the office. So if you got a coffee shop, you're in for a wild ride too. Right? It's going to affect people. He said, we're still not back at foot traffic levels that approached 2019. The alliance is now on alert for how new tariffs and the recession fears will affect visits to fast casual restaurants. So it continues, says restaurants in the city business development groups have been stepping up their game to woo more lunchtime customers back. So it talks about luring in more customers, especially with like live music and things like that. So they're playing live jazz and things like that. Um, so ultimately, you know, it says many workers say they just can't afford the price of grabbing a quick bite out. Hybrid office workers spend an average of $21.06 on lunch in 2024, up from $16 in 2023, according to a study of 2,000 full-time U.S. workers by Owl Labs, a video conferencing company. So yeah, as far as the people, they're saying this ain't working. This ain't it. This ain't it, fam. It says in a recent LinkedIn poll, 71% of about 4,250 respondents said they had made a resolution to bring their lunch to work more often. Yet new habits can be tough to forge. And so people are talking about how you have boredom because you have the same things over and over, which can get boring. So you can't have things, the same thing every single day, unless it's something that you really, really favor. But yeah, a lot of people can't do that. And then some people are still getting used to it and forgetting their lunches and things like that. But for the most part, this is one of the biggest issues right now facing Americans, is that in order to curb the financial burden that they're faced with, they now have to start bringing their lunch from home. And so this is really a sign of the times. This is America's new normal, is that people aren't able to really spend their money at small businesses anymore, because if you're not paying people enough to live, to thrive, then you're not going to shop. This goes into why many millennials and Gen Z, we're not having kids. Like the birth rate's dropping, because if we can't afford it, look, I'd rather spend $10 on a box of condoms than spend hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime, or 18 to 21 years for a kid, because we can't afford it. I'm wrapping it up. You know what I'm saying? Because the thing is, like, we're not gonna have, no. Like, how much a Plan B cost? Because we can't afford it, right? People are like, well, people aren't, opting for, buying homes. We can't afford it. So do you think that we're actually going to give priority to restaurants and sandwich shops and burger joints? No. We got bills to pay. Look, my light bill takes precedent over a tuna melt. Okay? So, unfortunately, this is what happens when you have corporate control over our government. And so now the corporations are starting to pay for it. And it ain't looking good. But just to let you guys know, this is what's going on. And a lot of restaurants, once they start to make less money, guess what they do? Start cutting. They cut their staff. Guess what? That means more layoffs. Less people working. And so what does that do to the economy? Breaks it down even further, right? More restaurants, because they're not planning for that big old lunch rush anymore. They're buying less food, meaning the suppliers and the supply chain, they're not going to make as much. When they start making less, or being ordered from less by these restaurants, guess what they need to do? Going to cut. And some of these workers that work at these places where they actually are in part of the supply chain, right? You have Cisco and US Foods and all these other companies. And so then it goes into the farmers, right? And so the farmhands are going to start hiring less farmhands. The farmers are going to start hiring less farmhands to help with the cultivation and the harvesting, because they're not being asked for as much anymore. And then those people get cut. See the cycle? So that's a reality. That's America's new normal. And if the corporations really want to play that game, that greed game, well, looks like they're going to starve themselves out. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.